اللهم صل على الحبيب محمد يا رب صل عليه وسلم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وسيق الذين اتقوا ربهم إلى الجنة زمرًا حتى إذا جاءوها وفتحت أبوابها وقال لهم خزنتها سلام. وقال لهم خزنتها سلام عليكم طبتم فادخلوها خالدين. وقالوا الحمد لله الذي صدقنا وعده وأورثنا الأرض نتبوأ من الجنة حيث نشاء فنعم أجر العاملين. وترى الملائكة حافين من حول العرش يسبحون بحمد ربهم وقضي بينهم بالحق وقيل الحمد لله وقيل الحمد لله. وترى الملائكة حافين من حول العرش يسبحون بحمد ربهم وقضي بينهم بالحق وقيل الحمد لله رب العالمين. وقضي بينهم بالحق وقيل الحمد لله رب العالمين. صدق الله العظيم. الفاتحة.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى Muhammad. Alhamdulillah, I'm back again to facilitate a discussion here, inshallah ta'ala, on digital detox. If you don't know what that topic is referring to in any shape or form, please make sure you stay here in the room. I say that because the digital world has become such an integral part of our lives that even those amongst us, and I'll age myself included, who were not raised during that digital world have been overcome by it. And it sometimes takes a moment to reflect and remember the times before there was Facebook, MySpace, AOL, Hotmail, right? Netscape. If you don't know what I'm talking about, if you do know who I'm talking about, you know exactly. But there was that time prior to that. But many of us, we forget that, or we have been born into this world where we are consumed daily by social media, technological communications that we have with each other, that it's become such an integral part of who we are. So what we wanted to do today is to discuss and get some reflections from our distinguished panel here on some of the challenges, some of the opportunities that this new world in which we are living in has given us. So inshallah ta'ala, what I'm going to do is to have each speaker share with us a few words, maybe a few reflections on this, a few insights, and inshallah ta'ala, then we will proceed with some maybe more specific questions and issues to raise. I'll begin inshallah ta'ala with Sheikh Zainab. We'll move left to right inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيد المرسلين محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. First of all, it's not Sheikha Zainab. Zainab is fine, because there's only one Sheikha Zainab in this community, that's Sheikha Zainab Alwani. So, regarding the topic, I have very strong feelings about the subject, so I'm really happy that you put me on this panel. Jazakumullah khair. When I was arriving to the airport yesterday, I was standing there to catch that shuttle that takes you from the gate to baggage claim, and I looked around. This is why I brought my cell phone up. I normally don't do this for presentations, but I looked around me and literally everybody was like this. The whole time, they're just like this. Everyone literally they're glued, there's like every single person was glued to their screen. That for me was really just disturbing. Some people had smartphones, some people had iPads and tablets, but every single person, they weren't interacting with anybody, they weren't communicating with anyone, they weren't having a conversation, they weren't just kind of maybe staring off into space, maybe thinking about stuff. Everybody was glued to this. And I could tell what people were doing. They were like scrolling their news feeds and looking at social media. And, I was talking to my mom about this, and there's just something that's very kind of like 1984 about the whole thing. Really that, no matter what our political persuasion is, no matter what background we come from, no matter what language we speak, no matter our religious affiliation, that we're all glued to these, right? And that our usage and our consumption and our addiction really to these devices, right, to technology is, I think it's really kind of reshaping who we are cognitively and spiritually as human beings. You know, I think I read the other day that Facebook now actually constitutes some kind of quasi-nation state, right? Because of its hundreds of millions of users. And we really need to think about this. And so in addition to the fact that we are all accessing and using technology that's been designed to pull us in and make us addicts, right? This stuff is actually spying on us too. And I'm not up here like, you know, Alex Jones InfoWars type of thing, please, none of that. But the other day I read, and this is in a reliable, you know, source, that, you know, if you have Alexa at home, or I don't know, what does Google use? But I know Amazon has Alexa and these other platforms where you've got these voice-activated devices that will do stuff for you, right? That nowadays researchers, right, have the ability to send commands, right, and instructions to these devices unbeknownst to the user. So completely unbeknownst to you, right, that this thing is now observing and watching and recording and can actually do things like, say, open the doors of your home if you have it hooked up to your home monitoring system. It can go and make purchases for you. It can probably also do other things. I mean, raise your hand if you've been, say, sitting somewhere having a conversation with someone completely unrelated to, you know, Siri or whatever, and then all of a sudden Siri decides that she's going to start talking to you about something. So I just want us to be very mindful of the fact there is absolutely nothing neutral about this technology. Nothing neutral whatsoever. Okay?
Stand line.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. I come from a background where I used to work in tech, and the company that I used to work for, we used to work in artificial intelligence, natural language processing, and it was considered to be very much from the cutting edge of technologies being used nowadays. In September, by Allah's grace, I was able to go to the Suhbah retreat with Sheikh Mukhtar Maghrawi. And perhaps what I would like to do is to share just a small reflection from that move and what it has meant, at least to me, from the perspective of digital detox. One of the things when you are removed from that business environment, and it is a very sort of stressful business environment where you're constantly checking your feeds, you're constantly posting, you even have quotas, right, for how many posts you have to put up, what you have to say, and you go to an environment where you can focus on the purpose for your creation. It's something extremely important. So we all know that statement of causality in the Quran, the greatest statement of causality, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He has created humanity and jinn for no other purpose except to worship Him. And the longer that I have been in Istanbul and I have been sitting with this particular question and sitting with that statement of causality, I've been asking myself repeatedly as to whether the technologies that I've surrounded myself with have been things that have been assisting me in my journey home, in my journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the things that the Sheikh has discussed in Istanbul that has been of critical importance is the incredible intellectual profundity of our scholarship, their depth, their intellect, and their heart. And one thing that you will start to do, I feel, when you start to question social media, and it's not a binary either or, but when you look at it from the superfluous use, you begin to ask yourself certain questions that are quite scary. That I am journeying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I have a limited time that Allah has allowed me in this world to make that journey home. And when I use social media in a superfluous fashion, what is it doing to me internally? Is it helping me or is it hurting me in that superfluous usage where it's not needed? What is it doing to me? And is it helping me? Sheikh Mukhtar discussed a statement of Ibn al-Qayyim where he speaks about salah. And he says in salah, the heart has a qibla. And just as in salah, you cannot turn your physical body away from the qibla, you must keep your heart focused on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when the heart moves away from its qibla, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ila khayrim minni, to someone better than me. And in this journey back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the superfluous use of technology when not needed, not for a purpose that I have designed, is something essentially where I feel now that when I use technology and the message light is flashing and the message light is blinking, I'm making a choice to turn to creation as opposed to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think that at some levels, as I sit and I delve through these issues internally, this is the crux of the matter. That I am in a journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I must ready myself. I must detoxify myself. For that statement in the Quran that the only one that benefits is the one who reaches Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with a clean heart, a qalb that has been detoxified, purified. And therefore, if I am serious in my journey, and I must strive to be, and I must try to be, I must ask myself, are the technologies that I'm surrounding myself with and that I'm using, have I given them thought? Have I really reflected on whether they are helping me or hindering me in my journey back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
Dr. Brown.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So I want to make 5 points. Well, first of all, it's kind of odd that I'm on this panel. Maybe I'm like a recovering I'm in detox myself or something. Anyway, so I have 5 points. I'll try to make them quickly. First one, human beings were not designed to absorb all the tragedy, all the horror, all the damage, all the news in the world. Right? So, you live in your village, some guy's, cow died. Everyone's upset about that. That's like kind of what we're designed to deal with. You can't deal with, earthquake in Tibet and, ship overturns in Korea and all this. You'll be overwhelmed. But the news is designed to constantly provoke you, get your interest, outrage you, intrigue you, things like pique your appetites. So really, you should think about just certain things you just don't want to hear about. Just don't engage in those issues and really limit what kind of material you get. I'm not trying to say live in a bubble or be ignorant. You should be aware generally what happens. But for me personally, there's all sorts of issues. I just say, I know this issue's out there, but I'm just not gonna, I can't deal with this in my life, right? The second point, which kind of follows from that, is you don't have to always have an opinion about everything, right? You don't have to have an opinion about everything. Yeah, that's nice. Thank you very much. It's a good point, right? So that, but it's not just that we're arrogant people and we think that we have to offer. People want you to offer an opinion. A lot of people say, why don't you speak out on this? Why don't you say something about that? What do you think about this? It's perfectly okay to say, I don't know, have enough information, or I don't have time for this, or I'm not qualified to talk about this. In fact, from the perspective of a Muslim, it's irresponsible to speak about something if you don't have the requisite information or the requisite expertise, right? Or if you just don't care enough about it. So it's really important. It's okay. And some people will blame you and say, why didn't you speak out on this? And I think this is a stand we have to take almost as a society and say, look, just because you don't speak out on something doesn't mean you approve of it. Silence does not imply consent, because otherwise we would never be able to be silent. We would never be able to have a moment's peace. Okay. Third point, if you're going to talk about something or you're interested in something, make sure you verify the information. This is a basic principle in Islamic thought. As Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, the famous scholar from Khorasan, died 797 in the Common Era, said, Al-Isnad min ad-din, lawla al-Isnad laqal man yasha ma yasha, right? The Isnad, the chain of transmission, is part of our religion. If not for the chain of transmission, whoever wanted would say whatever they want. So you always have to try and find out, if you get a piece of information, what's the source? How did this come to me? The person who's telling me this, where did they get the information? Where did that person get the information? This is a little exciting thing in my life as a scholar. Just yesterday, I followed this. One book cited another book, another book cited another book, another book cited another book, another book cited another book. I went finally to the original source, and the information wasn't there. The whole thing was a big lie. This is a little professor, moment of excitement for professor. So to always try and really take this seriously, even if it's you're it's those moments when you're lazy about this or you don't follow through that you make a mistake and you end up regretting it. So really be thorough. Make it a principle in your life. The fourth point, right, as part of that point, is also, even if the source is trustworthy to you, try and corroborate it. Try and get another piece of information, because sometimes even trustworthy people make mistakes, and you want to get something to corroborate what they're saying. Okay, then, if you've found that out, ask another principle in Islamic thought, especially when it comes to weighty issues of, faith or morality, is يُسْأَلُ صَاحِبَ اللَّفْظِ عَنْ مُرَادِهِ. The person who utters the speech should be asked about what they meant. Right? It doesn't mean that people can always explain away what they said, or you have to listen to far-fetched explanations, but always give a person a chance to explain what they meant. And it's very simple. Think about all the times that you say something that someone takes the wrong way, and how much you wish they would come and ask you to give for a chance to explain what you meant. Okay. And then the last point, don't take someone's belief from someone who disagrees with them. Don't take someone's position from their opponent. Right? So if you want to know what Republican policy towards the environment is, not that I'm a big fan of that, but don't ask Democratic Party, functionaries. Go ask Republicans. And then, test them, push them on what they believe. But obviously you shouldn't trust someone's opponents for an accurate understanding of what their position is. Sometimes their opponents might actually have done really good analysis and show you the truth behind what someone's claiming. But you always have to remember that someone's opponent is not necessarily going to be an accurate source for what this person believes. Jazakumullah khair.
Those are beautiful points, Dr. Jonathan and Ustad Zainab and Sid Naeem. But I want to pose a question to the audience first before even answering that. Could you just raise your hands? How many people have Twitter, Facebook, Instagram? Don't be shy. Come on. Can we turn the lights on for 1 second, or am I? I'm going to shed some
Hands
light
are going
on this.
down.
Do we have? Okay, now raise your hands, please. Lights? No lights? You can see? Does that look 50%? You got covered? Okay, yes. Oh, wow. It's about, what would you say, 75%?
7, yeah.
So most of us do. I used to have Instagram until my mother started following me. I deleted that. Mom, I love you. I do. And I had a Twitter account, and I'll tell you what my personal experiences were with my Twitter account before I deleted it. I remember when I had my first follower. I was like sitting deflated, and all of a sudden, my chest comes up. Someone cares about what I say. And then I remember one statement I made, and it went I wouldn't call it viral. It had 50 retweets. And I was like, yeah, it's going all over the place. So I noticed this arrogance that started to build within my nafs, and this attachment now, and I was saying things just to get a reaction. And I started to realize that about myself. I'm like, oh, that's so gross. What's gotten into me? This is not what type of human being I should be. This is not what Allah or His Messenger sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa alayhi want from me. Now, it doesn't mean that Twitter's bad. It means that, back to Sidi Naeem's point, that my level of engagement with it at that point was just not healthy for me. So I had to start to make a decision. The other thing that really struck me, and it sort of hurt me, I had a good friend, who also used Twitter, and once I retweeted what another sheikh said, and he happened not to like that sheikh, so he cut me off and stopped talking to me because I did that. And I thought it was the oddest thing. And I said, what happened to normal human interaction? Like Dr. Brown just said, call the guy up and just say, hey, what's going on? I saw you retweeted that guy, and even if I retweeted, who cares? Why are you so invested in every little thing that I put out that it's now causing this negative impact in our relationship? And I realized I was doing the same thing. I would see what someone would write. I remember I'd go throughout the day and I'd have this anger in my chest. Nothing happened that day. No one said anything to me, but I did happen to read what other people might have been writing on Twitter, And suddenly it started to grow these emotions in my heart that I simply did not want there anymore. So I deleted that thing. And so I'm off it now. I've been detoxed.
Twitter detox. I'm going to tweet that right now. No, I don't have a Twitter account, so don't try to follow me. Not that you'd want to hear what I have to say. So if we can now tweak this out, and the reason why I think sometimes two things that I see in terms of working in the community is one, like we had mentioned before, some of our people who may be a little bit younger than us have no point of reference whatsoever of even understanding maybe sometimes what we're even talking about when we talk about these issues. At best, which was touched on by Dr. Brown, content, right? At best, they can understand maybe content. There may be bad content on the internet, etc. But the medium itself, they don't necessarily understand oftentimes what's the issue. The second thing is parents of a lot of our young people who I think are oftentimes, I find, completely clueless of what this whole social media thing is and what it's actually affecting, the negative effects it has toward our children. And I don't want to focus, because we always get the kickback of, yes, but social media does this and it's informed about this and it's produced this. We know the good it's done, right? That's where it always goes to. We're trying to basically reassess some of the dangers that we face in there. And one of the things I wanted to just touch on is the issue of content and medium. In other words, I think some of you had touched on there's a problem with content sometimes in terms of truthfulness, etc. Never mind illicit things. But the second thing I think that some of you touched on, maybe you can tweak out a little bit more, is the problem with the medium itself, right? That we have to look out for, or some of the challenges that the medium itself, not the benefits we know, but some of the challenges or problems that it has, that maybe we can at least become conscious of these things. So if anyone has any thoughts on that, the format and the medium itself.
I have some thoughts on the medium itself, and I'm not someone who's obviously worked in technology, but I have read quite a bit about the psychology behind the design itself. And again, my point about this technology, that technology is not neutral. Often we think of science, we think of science and technology in terms of it being sort of completely neutral, right? That it doesn't come with its own sort of framework of values itself, and it does. And the thing is, with these smart devices and so on, I mean, these devices are not solely designed by people who are working on the technical aspect, right? The engineering side of this. It's an established fact that the people who design these devices actually consult with behaviorists, with psychologists, with people who have some insight into human behavior and how we become addicted. And they do design these devices with this idea in mind, that basically how can they design something that's actually sort of addictive to use, that will actually keep pulling us in because we keep going back to this device for the constant reinforcement and stimulation it provides. I mean, there's actually a psychological component to why when this phone lights up and I get notifications that I want to open it, right? And the problem with this is that I can literally be on this thing all day long. Parenting experts are now suggesting that we curtail our children's internet usage and media usage really, to 2 to 3 hours a day. I mean, that number in and of itself is appalling. 2 or 3 hours a day, and maybe they get 30 minutes of exercise. I mean, it kind of sounds like prison in a way. And again, I cannot underscore that there is something about the way this is designed that we are finding reinforcement through opening this and seeing how many likes that we got on our post, how many followers we have on our Twitter feed, et cetera, et cetera. I also deleted my Twitter account because, Sheikh Mu'tasim, it was just pointless. I'm like, well, why am I on here? Oh, look, I have 5-10 followers. I mean, I'm like, what's the point behind all this? Like, why am I on here to begin with? Because then I found myself, with your experience, trying to find things that I thought would be interesting to people out there. I'm like, this is ridiculous. So I deleted it. So, So the point is that I think that the technology itself is so problematic. And I read this article in The Atlantic, you can look it up, where they interviewed this guy that's basically a proponent for how we can make these devices more responsible and less addictive. And and what they stated in this article is really stated with me that the average smartphone user, I think this is an adult, the average adult who is a smartphone user opens his or her phone anywhere from 150 to 200 times daily. All right, and compare that to the number of times we pray, or we make dhikr, or interact with our family, or do anything meaningful. 150 times a day. Accessing this phone, and that's not even counting people who are actually addicted to gaming and that sort of thing. So just think about that.
Yeah, I don't think we appreciate the power of this thing, right? And I think this is one of the challenges that we have. One psychologist that we brought to our center, expert on these things, non-Muslim, and he was saying, it was a very interesting, I think, analogy. He said, teenagers, he's like, I'm telling parents, he was a child psychologist, he said, cannot handle this. Point blank. He said, the power that this thing has is not in the developmental capability for a teenager to handle. And he said, parents have to understand this. And he said, it's literally like giving a 2-year-old a knife. And then when he cuts himself, you yell at him why he cut himself. He said a 2-year-old is not capable of handling a knife. Period. And so who's to blame there? So we give our children these things, teenagers, even younger now. I mean, I work with kids, you're talking 7, 8-year-olds. And we're expecting them to somehow check themselves when we ourselves, as Sister Zainab just mentioned, can't even control our own usage of it. How are we expecting teenagers to do it? And again, we're not even talking about content, right? Just the medium itself. And so, if anyone has any other thoughts on that.
There's a large sense of trauma that also comes from using these devices. I mean,
Right.
This idea of cyberbullying is
Yes.
real. I mean, look, Naeem can speak to this as a CEO of an AI company, and Dr. Jonathan Brown, mashallah, may Allah continue to protect you and guard you for all the khair, the work that you do for the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal. And I know, but that, you've had a lot of challenging situations over the past couple years as well. I assume most of it being online, that's got to be traumatizing. Though it's not happening face to face, but that impact, the feeling of it, even though it's happening online, has to,
Yeah. Well, people, 2 points I think are important. One is, people talk online in ways they wouldn't talk in person, and so they can be very, very insulting. I don't really meet like Islamophobe people very often, just because I'm in a university and I don't hang out with people like that. But you meet those people online and they can say whatever they want to you. Sometimes I get hate mail. Actually, the mail in that someone actually wrote that out and took some time. It takes no time to write.
You
something.
appreciated that.
Yeah, But one thing I did, and I did this, I never had Twitter on my phone. Well, I had it for like a week, and then my wife said, you cannot have Twitter on your phone. And I listened to her. And then I also listened to her again, maybe about 2 months ago or a month ago. I took Facebook off my phone. So I have Facebook on my computer, but now, and actually it's very interesting. Try doing that. Try deleting Facebook and Twitter from your phone. And then I started realizing, I was looking at my phone, I was like, what am I supposed to do with this now? I don't have anything to do. I started looking at like the stuff that
Talk
the phone
on it?
gives you. The Apple sends you news stories. I started reading those. But the point is that if you take these things off your phone, you're less obsessed with your phone, a lot less. And then also, if you want to send a tweet or make a Facebook post, you have to go and open your computer and sign in, and then it's really different. It's a lot more layers of you sure you really want to say this? Are you sure you're not just upset right now? So those are I would actually recommend that you take these things off your phone and just have them on your. I assume you have computers, on your computer.
All right, everyone, pull out your phones. I'm not willing to do it. See, Naeem, from your perspective, the trauma, from an AI, what does it do to the human mind and soul and body?
I think that the impact is so severe. It's something that's been unstudied. I was actually at a conference once, and one of the technology speakers started speaking about Neil Postman, and he started speaking about, I think it's the 6 or 7 questions that you must ask of any technology before you use it. And I think that this is something that we as Muslims must start to internalize and to practice. And the children example, I think, is a good one, because I think one of the problems with it is it's the medium, but it's also the content. And it's the idea that within 1 or 2 clicks, you can have access to almost anything and everything. And having a young child or an adolescent young man in that environment is extremely problematic, because access is so easy. And speaking as an adult, I think that it's just as problematic, because what I am inside, I will externalize in my actions. And so if internally I am someone who is unclean because of various spiritual malaise, what I will surround myself through social media is just that. And not only that, the statistical probability that I will fall into sin is just so high that it necessitates that I take a detox from it. Because of the fact that in a feed, etc., the likelihood that I'm going to see things, experience things, whether it be, there's just too much, I think, to mention, it's better for me to detox. And I think one of the blessings of having the conference now is right before Ramadan, I think that this has to become part of the fast for us.
Yes. One of the things that you mentioned, I think, the portability, especially when it comes to young people as well, too. One of the things I find, there are a lot of parents give their youth these tools, and then they leave them alone. And they say, I trust them, I don't want to, whatever, what have you. And, following what Sidi Naeem just mentioned, when we were growing up, some of us were teenage boys, our parents didn't come in the room, drop a stack of Playboys on the floor, say, hey, only read the articles, and leave us for 6 hours. I mean, that's insane. Because for most of us, that would be, you'd set your child up for failure. And I feel as parents, we're setting our children up for failure by giving them free and bridled access to this power, leaving them alone, and then we're expecting them to do what is right. It's really unfair. And if we're really doing our parenting job, I think we have to be much more involved and recognize that we don't want to be putting our children in a situation where they're coming back with some sort of difficulties and problems and addictions and what have you. And we're like, what happened? I thought you were such a good... Well, who's the one who provided them those opportunities? So I think as parents, we have to be a little bit more wise, and maybe a little bit more like parents, and start taking that opportunity to really try to control some of this.
Yeah, to follow up on that, I think that the digital media is like the new sohbah. It's the new companionship. And so, I can spend that time online, I can spend that time in chat rooms, I can spend that time on sites, and that essentially becomes my companions. And that's who I take from, and that's who I become. And so just as we would have sort of serious oversight, we would want serious oversight if our children were being in the company of bad friends. It's even more so because of the degree of exposure that they would get online, not only for our children, but also for myself, that I might know myself, and I should know what my tendencies are, and I should know what are the things I need to work on internally so that I can put up the right barricades to my eventual succumbing to those influences if left unrestricted.
If I may throw in here, and please, if you can join, if you have some reflections on this as well too, regarding medium. One of the things that I find with working with young people is because of the convenience of this, it's very easy to, again, I'm speaking from a parent's perspective, so forgive me, but it's very easy to always, to keep our kids quiet, give them this to entertain him here and there, etc. But one of the things I'm finding is unfortunate about our young people growing up, they have no experience of life. And what I realized, it's because of this portability. So if we're in a park, they're on the phone. If they're at the conference, they're on the phone. If they're in the movie theater, they're on the phone. If they're in the mall, they're on the phone. So you're physically changing the location of the person, of our children. But what's the experience? It's literally the same exact thing. There is no multifaceted experience with our young people. And I feel sad because it's like a tragedy. You know, you talk to, sometimes you can talk to them, talk to kids who are 22, 23, who have been involved in this for years. They literally cannot remember their youth because it was all one single experience. And I feel sad. You know, I mean, we ask older people to remember their youth, whatever, the good, the bad they did, whatever they did this, they were hanging out with their friends. And we're depriving our children of this because of the convenience of, I don't want to be bothered.
It's interesting you say that because growing up, we used to go grocery shopping with my mom, and we'd be down the aisles and we'd be nagging her like to buy this, to buy that. Like we'd be all over my mom as kids. I mean, before I moved, I was at BJ's, and I'm walking down the aisles and I see these parents with 2 children in their cart sitting, and each one of them just on the phone. And I'm like, this is such an interesting experience. It is. It goes with us. It goes with us everywhere. And just for transparency, this concept of digital detox, we actually borrowed this title from a conference that happens in Silicon Valley where all these CEOs get together for weekends with no technology to detox themselves from that which they're addicted to and got us all addicted to as well. So I just wanted to put that out there, but no.
I mean, there's one sort of optimistic point. I realized a while ago, Muslims are actually pretty polite, mashallah. I mean, I didn't realize. So if you look, even Muslims argue with each other, even about our nasty arguments online. Go compare this to like non-Muslim arguments. You know, Muslims don't say like your mother this, your father this. You know, I mean, really, like only maybe one Muslim I know has ever said this. One Muslim. But I'm not going to say who, obviously. But the point is, I realized like Muslims, we're very hard on ourselves. We're like, oh, we're always late, we're lazy, we're et cetera, et cetera. But actually, I think we have a pretty good floor of adab that we generally don't go below, and the rest of society goes below that a lot, into the basement.
Okay, we have a few minutes left, and what I'm going to suggest is we spent pointing out a couple of observations about the digital medium and the content and the problems and challenges we have. Now, the reality is not everybody's going to be able to detox fully. Hopefully we'll be able to maybe remove it off our phones to give us a little bit more freedom, but maybe that won't happen. And some of us aren't ready for that, or maybe the nature of our work or our job or what have you, we need these things. Or we believe we need these things. What would you suggest is ways that which we can try to balance this tool and these tools that we have out there for those who aren't willing to totally detox or don't feel ready for that or don't think it's necessary, but that we can maybe provide some sort of guidelines of how to approach it, again, from the medium perspective, and I would also say for the content perspective. And I'm thinking specifically in terms of the content, the Instagrams and a lot of these things, especially with their young girls, and there's a lot of psychological issues that is coming up, and self-esteem issues, depression issues. All the stuff is coming from sometimes some of these mediums which aren't even news-based or what have you, or even talking about sources. It's purely just for entertainment purposes. So maybe some guidelines for those who aren't ready to totally detox that maybe we can share, or suggestions that we can provide.
Well, my first piece of advice, and really this is directed to myself, is just to recognize that there is a problem here, because there really is. I mean, again, as I stood there waiting for that shuttle, every single person was glued to their device, and you see it all the time, as you mentioned, Sheikh Mu'tasim, at the grocery store, that we're giving, as you said, Ustadh Safi, right? That what we're doing is we're, I don't know, sort of, what's the word, abdicating our role as parents and giving these devices to our kids. But what I would say is, first and foremost, identify that there's a problem and actually look at, and you can actually discern problematic patterns from from the advertisements that pop up as you're surfing the web. I mean, I noticed, because I read a lot of news, and I made it one of my goals to kind of like pull back from that during the month of Ramadan. This is my digital detox, is that I noticed that when I started to gravitate towards certain news stories, very weird advertisements would pop up, and they were really kind of tailored to my own kind of like browsing habits, and that was really frightening. So I noticed, for example, if I was reading stories about, I don't know, some lurid crime somewhere, the advertisements I was seeing were just really, really startling. So we know there's a problem just from the advertisements that we're seeing, because they actually use algorithms to make sure that those advertisements are tailored and reflect your browsing history. That's one thing. So identify that there's a problem. And then the second thing is that just be very mindful of how we spend time in Ramadan. I mean, Ramadan, you know, someone asked me this last year, do I have to complete a khatam in Ramadan? Like, do I have to? And that question was really bothersome to me, not because I resented that they asked the question, I'm glad they asked it, but just the idea that, would we ask that question of anything else? Would we say, well, do I really have to put my phone down in Ramadan? I can't go on Facebook just once, twice. I mean, do I really have to leave my Instagram? Do I really have to stop with Snapchat and all that? We wouldn't ask that question. But someone asked me, do I really have to complete a khatam or a complete reading of the Quran in Ramadan? So I think we really need to look at how are we prioritizing our time? How are we allocating our time to begin with? Time is a very precious resource. And as Ustad Naeem said, we have to look at this idea of superfluous usage, right? To begin with, I mean, there's very little that I'm actually doing on here that's really critical. So I've just made it a goal to just kind of put this down, turn it off if I can, or just put it down, put it out of sight for a certain number of hours per day in Ramadan. It's really important to have that balance. And every time I feel tempted to open this up, go and do something else.
I think that from practically the advice that I would be giving to myself first is that, you know, if you think you can't detox, you must detox. and I think the key to the detox that I think for me personally is that even if it's something that's really small, that conscientious choice to turn away from creation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if done repeatedly, will become more and more and more sweet. I was hoping that the session would be Sheikh Muhtasim leading us in dhikr as the detox, but just that idea of that I have a chance, whether it's 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, to speak to the divine, to speak to my Creator, to speak to He who I am going to speak to who I have wronged in my life and to rectify that, and the solace that can come from that, and the peace that can come from that, and the joy that can come from that. And the more I have sabr in that, the more the detox becomes easier and delightful until I am in no need of created things in order to bring me happiness, comfort, and solace.
Dr. Brown?
I mean, I would just say that the only times I've ever changed someone's mind on any kind of Facebook discussion like that is when I was very, very polite. And I would just say, anytime you want to make a comment or anything, add like 2 or 3 layers of politeness butter to that, right? I mean, really just write your post or something in your mind or even in the window, and then just go through and add, smiley faces, add assalamu alaikum, add, I really appreciate what you've said, it's almost make it artificially nice, because that's the way, in order to actually reach people, you have to talk like that. If you talk even as you would naturally in a conversation, it's too harsh and people will get angry and they won't be open to your perspective.
Beautiful, beautiful points. And I would just say, I think ultimately when I reflect on my interaction with social media and what was I doing, I was looking for something. And I realized what I was looking for, I did not find there. It's what I was really looking for is what Sidi Naeem was mentioning. And that's the only thing that's going to fill this gaping hole in my heart, this self-worth, this sense of importance. We get so excited when someone else recognizes us, but that fades so fast, and the nafs, the nature of what it is, as we've been learning throughout this whole weekend, it just wants more and it craves more, and it will violate and do more to get that. And so if I'm constantly going to social media or going to creation for that, by Allah, I'll never find it. I'll actually find the opposite. But if I can start this drawing away process and try to start this relationship with Allah, then I'll find all of that beauty that I'm looking for. And that's where it is. It's with Him Azza wa Jal, but to do that, I have to start to allocate some time for Him to find Him. So my advice would be, get off social media. Get off social media and start to rectify our relationships with Allah. Especially, you're coming into a time period, inshallah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to facilitate that, especially in Ramadan, and that's what I have.
Jazakallah khairan. And I will just close for young people out there who may be a little confused about what we're talking about. Just realize that social media and the internet is not real life. It's not the same. It's not the same thing. Everyone who is here in this room today, their experience of what they're hearing from the speakers, even our Quran reciters, is not the same, with all due respect of those who stayed home and are on the live stream. It is not the same, right? There's an experience we're having here that is being deprived of someone who's sitting in their living room watching this right now. Not that they're not benefiting, but it's not the same. So just realize that whatever you're doing in social media, your relationships, whatever this and that, even if there's khair in it, it's not the same as the real thing. And there's something, as our speakers had said, there is something more beautiful than that. So don't think I'm depriving myself of that somehow I'm losing out. And you will taste it once you unplug, just for a short time. You will immediately begin to tasting it if you do that unplug. So inshallah ta'ala, we want to capitalize hopefully on this month of Ramadan, that maybe we can take, this is one definite take home that we can try to do for all of us, and myself included, inshallah ta'ala, that we can benefit most beautifully from that month of Ramadan by saying, all right, we say no to food, we say no to social media, inshallah ta'ala, at least for some time, and then maybe we'll taste the sweetness of real life. Jazakallah khairan for everybody for sharing, and we're hoping hopefully that this conversation will continue, inshallah ta'ala, amongst ourselves. Not over Twitter, but in actual, over coffee, over tea. Continue it, inshallah ta'ala.